Hey guys, welcome back to the Guilty as Charged podcast presented by the Blue Wire Podcast Network. My name is Steven, and I'm happy to be joined today by Jake Rowe, who covers the Georgia Bulldogs for CBS and 247 Sports. Jake, thanks for taking the time to join me. How you doing today?
Uh, Hey man, I'm doing great. Can't complain. I appreciate you having me on.
Yeah, of course, man. Happy to have you. I think Chargers fans are going to enjoy this conversation. It certainly seems like our new coach, Brandon Staley, had a lot of great things to say about the program down there in Georgia, and obviously that showed when they drafted two players out of the university. So let's start with this. What was your general reaction when the Chargers took Trey McKitty in the third round and then followed it up with Mark Webb in the seventh round a couple weekends ago?
Well, I think the first thing I thought was, wow, the Senior Bowl matters.
Yeah.
Because there was no combine and there was no there wasn't a ton of production in his senior year. He got off to a little bit of a slow start because he tore his meniscus during preseason camp. I think during maybe the first or the second scrimmage, and it was an elongated preseason camp, like 5 weeks because of COVID.
Yeah.
And that caused him to get off to a slow start. He missed the first couple games of the season. He wasn't really 100% for a while. Did some really good things there at times for Georgia and had an opportunity to do some others if Georgia was a little bit more sorted out at quarterback. But then for him to go to the Senior Bowl, has such a good week, and then gets taken in the third round. I mean, top 100, top 100 guy. I was a little bit surprised by that. I kind of had him as more of a fourth or fifth round guy. One of those guys that you're like, all right, he's going to get drafted a little later, just off production and maybe not quite being. I mean, because the NFL's changing a little bit on tight ends. I mean,
Yeah.
it's you don't see as many inline guys, and Trey is not a true inline guy only. He's this flex guy, but at the same time, I kind of look at it as like, well, you didn't put up a ton of numbers in college. Are you going to be a top 100 player as a tight end in the NFL? And he is, and I think a lot of that's due to the Senior Bowl and how good he looked out there, how he measured in. I mean, he's a big dude, man. He's a big guy that you don't really realize how big he is. I mean, he's got 11-inch hands.
Dang, that is an impressive thing for sure. And like you said, it seems like a traits over production kind of thing. What about Mark Webb? What was your reaction there, and kind of where did you think he could go before the draft?
I think that was about right. I may have had him undrafted, or sixth, seventh round, and I think it was, it's almost one of those things where his strengths I thought were maybe used as a weakness. I thought they were going to maybe be used as a weakness for him, and that's he can do a lot of different things for you, but does he have one hat that you really feel like he can wear really
Mm,
well? And because he didn't play any safety at Georgia, he practiced there some. He started out at cornerback, and I'm sure we'll talk about the position change here pretty soon. But he mainly was a sub package guy. He was the nickel star, is what Georgia calls it, because it's got an S and it replaces the Sam in the base set. And then he also played the money, which replaces the Mike linebacker in the dime defense. He played that as the sixth defensive back some too. He started actually there, I believe, in 2018, and then in 2019, 2020, both years he was more of a star nickel type guy, and he did a lot of good things. I mean, he really did. Great in run support. But I just didn't think that, is he a safety? Well, he doesn't have any tape playing safety. Is he a corner? I don't think he's a corner. But he maybe could help you depending on your scheme at all three different positions. But is he one guy? And I think maybe that developed into a little bit of a weakness for him.
yeah, I can totally see that, and we'll certainly dive into that, a little more at length. Obviously, Trey McKitty transferred from Florida State. It was a grad transfer. What was that recruitment process like for him from Florida State to Georgia, and what do you think kind of drew the Bulldogs to recruiting him as a grad transfer?
Well, it was quick. He's a guy. He's cut from a different cloth. I believe he had his pilot's license
Yeah.
before he ever came over to Georgia. I mean, he's a different guy. You can tell it when we only got to talk to him through Zooms, but you could just tell he was a little bit of a different cat. But in a very good way, by the way, in a very, very good way. Kind of one of those old soul, wise beyond his years type dudes. But it went quick. I think he realized that there was a chance at Georgia. Georgia realized there was a chance to get a veteran tight end on campus, but because the Bulldogs had just lost, some good players at that position. I mean, they were kind of looking for a guy to step in and be an experienced guy. John Fitzpatrick and Darnell Washington, a true freshman and a sophomore there. Washington, the true freshman, and Fitzpatrick, the redshirt sophomore, I believe he was. Neither one of those guys had played at all. And so Georgia wanted to go out and get a veteran guy. I think they went pretty hard after Trey McKitty. McKitty saw an opportunity to do it. And there was also a relationship there. Miami recruited him pretty heavily coming out of high school, and Georgia's tight ends coach, Todd Hartley, was at Miami whenever they were recruiting McKitty. So there was kind of a pre-existing relationship there.
Well, that makes a lot of sense for sure. All right, let's cover Mark Webb, obviously recruited to Georgia as a wide receiver. What was he like as a receiver? What do you think that recruitment process was like? And when did he transition to the defensive side of the ball?
Well, here's the thing. Mark Webb dropped a couple interceptions in his career at Georgia, and that you know what fans say when that happens. Well, that's why he's a defensive back. Well, here's the thing, man. Mark Webb was having a great preseason camp at Georgia at receiver. He just was. I mean, he was off to a really good start. I thought out of that class, and he signed in a wide receiver class that actually ended up being a little bit of a bust for Georgia. Because Trey Blunt was in that class. I believe Matt Landers was in that class. Both of those guys transferred out after this past season. Jeremiah Holloman was a stud athlete, but needed some time to kind of grow and actually had a really good 2018 season, but never really panned out because he had some off-field stuff and got dismissed from the team. But Webb was the guy that when he enrolled and you got through the first couple weeks of spring, you're like, okay, well, who of these four young wide receivers are going to make an impact? Webb would have been number one on my list. Wow. Then you look at the travel roster for the Notre Dame game, which was in week 2, and you see Webb on there as a DB, and you're like, what? What's going on here? Well, Kirby gets asked about it after the game, and he takes the opportunity to kind of laugh and wag his finger at us a little bit, because none of the reporters had picked up on it in the blink of an eye that we get to watch of practice, which is like 5 minutes. So you're out there, we're out there scurrying, check and roll, because that's really
so how dare you not figure that out?
Yeah, how dare you not figure that out, right? But yeah, none of us picked up on that, and they had moved him to defensive back, and he was initially moved to cornerback, played a lot of special teams, and that's one of the things that I think may give him an opportunity to stay in the league for a long time. I mean, when you look at some of the Steve Taskers, and I know that's probably before a lot of people's time, but your Steve Taskers, and I'm drawing a blank on the dude in New England that's basically played forever as a special teamer. You see some of those guys. Is it Kasim Osgood? Was that the guy?
He was the Chargers guy.
Yeah, with the Chargers, right? Yeah, so that's probably a good comparison there in terms of a special teamer, because he's 6'1", 6'2". He can really run. He's very physical. He's fearless. He gives me the impression that at worst, he might be the kind of guy that can play 6, 7, 8 years in the NFL as a special teams ace.
So that's an interesting point, because the Chargers, obviously, if you follow the team, you know how bad they were on special teams last year. And a lot of that, in my opinion, stems from them not bringing back Adrian Phillips, who, of course, left in free agency to New England a couple of years ago. And the one thing that he did for the Chargers, aside from special teams, is he was kind of that star money linebacker safety hybrid. So a lot of people are just kind of wondering where Webb is going to play in the NFL, because he was announced as a safety. He didn't play safety in college. He played receiver in college. So what kind of role on defense do you think Webb could carve out, for the Chargers in the NFL?
I've always liked him as a safety. I've always, even when he got moved from receiver and they were like, he's playing cornerback, I'm like, are you serious? Like, I mean, I just didn't really, because he's just such a big bodied kid, and he runs well, but there's some stiffness there. I definitely think he would fit at a safety position. I think he could play either one. I think he could play free. I think he could play strong. I definitely think he could help out in the sub package. He could be, I remember a couple years ago when the Chargers matched up against Lamar Jackson in the playoffs, and what was it, 7 defensive backs, 6 defensive backs that they ran at. He's the kind of guy that can kind of come in for you and play a hybrid role and do those type things. But one thing I really have always respected and liked about Mark Webb is, you flip on the Notre Dame game in 2019 when Notre Dame came to Athens, and he's lined up at the star position. He's coming off the edge, and he's got contained. He's got force responsibility there, and he goes one on one with their tight end, and I can't remember his name. He got Cole Kmet, got drafted by the Bears
Okay.
last year. Big dude, 6'6", 260 pounds, and he blows him up. I mean, he wins that battle, one on one. I mean, he just kind of gets into his chest and shuts down the run game, sets the edge, and that's the kind of player he is. I mean, he's a very physical football player. And at his pro day, I think one of the buzz comments he made was, "Hey, listen, and in middle school ball, I was the best nose tackle in the district. I'll play nose tackle if I can." He's that kind of guy. Now, that kind of guy, they don't, I don't necessarily know that they grow on trees, but there are a lot of guys out there willing, but
Yeah.
is he going to be able? And the league choose guys up and spits them out. So it'll be interesting to see if he kind of gets the breaks, if he can stay healthy, if he can adapt quickly and be the kind of guy that can hang on to a roster. Cause it's hit or miss on seventh rounders.
It is. And I think, a lot of people were surprised when they took him, but I think, like you mentioned, the special teams value, a little bit of versatility on defense. I think he could carve out a role. So getting back to McKitty for a second, and then I'll ask you one more question after that. We've kind of talked about the tight end, how the tight end position has changed, and the Chargers have Jared Cook, who came over in free agency and really doesn't play tight end. He really kind of plays receiver, doesn't do much blocking. So what do you think Trey McKitty can learn from Jared Cook, and maybe where do you see his ceiling going? Because he only caught 6 passes at Georgia, and he was good production at Florida State, but not great. So where do you think Trey McKitty can go in the NFL in terms of his ceiling?
Well, I mean, I think, playing with a guy like Justin Herbert, I think if he can get an opportunity to play and play a lot, he's never played for a really good quarterback. And that's just, I mean, he got a little taste of it with JT Daniels there at the end of the season for Georgia when JT got rolling, but Georgia struggled at the quarterback position for, the early part of this season. He missed 2 of those games to begin with. I mean, Stetson Bennett played, pretty well in game 2 against Auburn, came in and kind of rescued Georgia against Arkansas. That was probably the best Stetson Bennett played all year. And, Trey McKitty didn't even get any of that. He came in against Tennessee, made a couple nice catches. They missed him on a couple of really, big play potential type plays against Florida. DeJuan Mathis did. And so Georgia never really got settled at quarterback, but for maybe 3 games while McKitty was there. And, as it turned out, he caught his only touchdown pass during one of those games. So he was definitely a little bit more of a factor there. And then you all obviously saw Georgia's other tight ends get more involved in the bowl game, which he opted out of. I think he can be a really good player. I think he's got physical tools. He didn't run at pro day, which kind of maybe raises a little bit of a flag for me, but he did really well at the Senior Bowl and get some good players. I think he can be good. I mean, I don't really compare him to Jared Cook, who, by the way, the dude's got to have grandkids by now. I mean, I remember watching a Georgia South Carolina game in 2006 when he ran over Trey Battle, and Jared Cook's been around for a long time. I don't think they're all that similar in terms of players. I do think Trey McKitty has more inline potential. And, with that comes your ability to create even more mismatches. If you can line up on the end line of scrimmage, you've got to worry about being, okay, is he going to block me or do I have to run with him? Who's going to cover him? Who's going to get through that traffic to cover him? Stuff like that, shallow crossing routes and things of that nature. I think that he offers that type of versatility, and I think he's a really good athlete. And I just think there's some intangibles there in terms of intelligence and want to. They're going to kind of keep him in the mix for a while. And it's a good thing he's a 3rd round pick because he'll make some good money in that first contract, and there'll be an investment there.
Absolutely. I think that definitely could be something that could work in his favor. So. We talked a little bit about it. You talked about the pilot thing for Trey McKitty and Mark Webb's competitive nature. But who are the Chargers getting off the field in these 2 players out of Georgia?
I mean, Mark Webb, first class citizen. I mean, never heard a word about there being any issues there. Hard worker, super hard worker. I mean, he and DeAndre Swift are, I believe, are cousins. DeAndre was taken in the second round of the 2020 NFL draft by Detroit, and I believe those two kind of had a reputation for maybe letting themselves in the facility at like 11, 12 o'clock at night and running when they
Oh,
couldn't
wow.
sleep, and trying to do stuff like. I mean, listen. I don't. There are people who'll salivate over that. I'm kind of like, hey, go to sleep, man. Get some sleep. Your sleep's probably more
Get
important
those 8
than.
hours.
Yeah, sleep's probably a little bit more important than pulling a sled at 11:30.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I mean, you'd rather them be doing that than out getting a charge of some sort. And both of those guys, they come from good stock, and they come from a very hard nosed blue collar portion of the country, and they know how to work. And then Trey McKitty, obviously only got to cover him for that 1 year. But like I said, man, when you talk to him on a Zoom call, it's almost like you're talking to a 35, 40-year-old guy that you work with. It was one of those things. He could have conversations with the media, and he could kind of understand when you were trying to get a little bit more out of him than maybe
Mm.
he was told to say. Georgia programs their guys a little bit, and that's kind of a bummer sometimes. But he seems like a really good kid, and comes highly recommended in terms of the people who had covered him before. I know Brandon Sinone over at our Florida State side, you just glowed about him when I did a Q&A with him after he transferred to Georgia. So I've heard nothing but good things.
Well, that's who I talked to about for Florida State as well. So that's a funny little coincidence. Well, Jake, this has been awesome, man. Chargers fans, if you want to give him a follow, like I said, it does kind of feel like Georgia is going to become the new Notre Dame in Los Angeles. You can follow him at Rowe 247. And Jake, thanks again, man.
You got it, man. Anytime.